Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the kind invitation to present to you today. I'm Riaz Bhunnoo. I lead UKRI's Global Food Security Programme. Today I'm going to talk to you about how we frame the food security challenge, tell you a little bit about our food deep dive and current arrangements for food before highlighting some of our recent investments. So, the National Food Strategy found that food system is having a significant impact on our environment and our health. It's of course not the first report to have found this, and our work in UKRI has had a focus on health and sustainability and resilience for quite some time. However, it was a systemic and robust piece of work and added to the body of evidence on the need for change in the food system. A whole system approach to this challenge is important, and this slide highlights why. On the left is what we should be eating for health, and on the right is what we're actually producing. These charts imply our food system is not producing the right thing for health. Globally, more grains, sugars and fats are produced and are needed for healthy diets, but not enough fruits and vegetables. These grains, sugars and fats are highly subsidised, and when refined and combined with manufacturing, and promoted, of course, by marketing, lead to cheap and unhealthy products that permeate our food environments, resulting in overconsumption, poor nutrition and health. We clearly need to better join up consumption and production and improve environmental outcomes in time. In terms of health, poor diet is the biggest risk factor for early death worldwide. Two key contributors: undernutrition. Over 820 million people are undernourished around the world, and around 2 billion are facing moderate or severe food insecurity, and obesity and overweight. Around 2 billion adults and 380 million children are obese or overweight, and numbers are increasing across the globe. Obesity and overweight is associated with an increased risk of type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease and cancer. Bringing this to the UK, 2/3 of adults are overweight or obese. 1 in 3 children leave primary school overweight or obese, which then leads to problems in later life. Low socioeconomic status is the single most consistent risk factor for not consuming a healthy diet, so there are clear issues around inequality. In terms of the environment, many of the impacts of food and agriculture are shown in this chart. Food production, which of course is driven by consumption, uses 70% of all freshwater withdrawals, causes over a quarter of all GHG emissions, and contributes to biodiversity loss, soil degradation, and impacts on aquatic ecosystems. Couched in a slightly different way, planetary boundaries are being breached, as shown in the map on the left. If we were to respect planetary boundaries, but leave production and consumption unchecked, we could feed 3.4 billion people. However, if we optimise land and resources to grow food for healthy diets, reduce food waste, we could feed over 10 billion. And this really underlines the need for both production and consumption changes. It's worth noting, though, some of the key assumptions here. That food is distributed equally through global trade, food loss and waste are halved, and a quarter of our protein comes from animal sources, all significant challenges. It also doesn't account for land that might be needed for bioenergy, carbon capture and storage, all important considerations for future scenario development. Current economics includes a lot of subsidy alongside costs to the environment and health that are currently externalised. For example, the analysis done by Frontier Economics showed the annual economic cost of obesity and overweight to the UK is £98 billion. That's equivalent to 4% of our GDP. So there's questions here about how do we both change the incentives and reflect the true cost of food to encourage everyone in the food system to channel their efforts towards improving health and environmental outcomes. Change is necessary, and there are many global challenges facing the food system. For example, climate change and issues such as extreme weather and the changing spread of pests and diseases, the transition to net zero and more sustainable food production, land use change and issues such as biodiversity loss and soil health, resilience to shocks, geopolitics in particular is becoming increasingly challenging, health, including access for all to a healthy, nutritious diet. Lots of challenges here. And I would highlight a clear need for research in all of them, with the translation of that knowledge into policy and practice. So we think about the food system in UKRI. A system is simply a set of things working together as part of an interconnected whole. We frame issues in this way because the food system is complex and highly interconnected. This approach avoids unavoided consequences from interventions in one part of the system adversely affecting another. So, for example, simply growing more veg for health that people then don't want to eat and that end up perishing. It also encourages interdisciplinarity and holistic solutions closer to real-world policy making. So on to what we do in UKRI. So we have 5 strategic themes within UKRI. This is where a lot of our interdisciplinary research funding has been channeled over the last few years, around £350 million, alongside other mechanisms like interdisciplinary responsive mode. You can see we're supporting a wide variety of areas through what we call our collective funds. These are not owned by any one council. There are 9 councils in UKRI, not owned by any one council, but are collectively shaped and delivered by all. Food is unique in that it spans all 5 of our strategic themes. And there are 2 programs that I've personally led on within these themes. So one is on food system resilience, funded through the Building a Secure and Resilient World theme. I'll say a bit more about that later. The other is an £8.5 million call on health inequalities in the food system, funded through the Creating Opportunities, Improving Outcomes theme, which is trying to help those on low incomes to eat well. We're hoping to make an announcement on those grants shortly. But there have been other programs. So, for example, Land Use and Net Zero, funded through Building a Green Future, Antimicrobial Resistance, funded through the Tackling Infections theme, and the Centres for Climate Change and Health, funded through Better Health, Ageing and Wellbeing theme. So the point I really want to make here is that food cuts across all of these themes. And given the importance of food, UKRI's Executive Committee commissioned a deep dive on our food investments. I'll say a bit more about that now. So UKRI funds research across the whole food system, supporting skilled people and collaboration with industry, policymakers and NGOs, both at a domestic level and internationally. This is through schemes such as managed mode funding, but also council's responsive mode funding, which are open at any time, strategic institute programs and ODA funding as well. So UKRI's Executive Committee asked for a deep dive on food to develop a greater understanding of the range and depth of food-related programs and activities supported by UKRI, essentially to ensure they're coordinated and delivered effectively. I'm using food here as a shorthand for all of the challenges that I've outlined on food security across the whole food system from production to consumption. So this chart shows you that UKRI spend on food-related research has grown steadily from an annual spend of just over 231 million in 16-17 to just under 307 million in 2021. So that equates to about 1.3 billion pounds in total over 5 years, a substantive investment. BBSLC is the biggest funder, as would be expected given the centrality of this area to its remit. But clearly all councils have a role to play in the interdisciplinary food systems research. So a number of recommendations were made in the Food Deep Dive report, and I'll just focus on 4 of these. And the actions we've taken since. So we have established a new senior level UKRI group to oversee our work on food research and innovation and to ensure coordination and collaboration. The group is chaired by a new UKRI food champion, also a new development. Her name's Stella Peace. Some people know is executive chair of Innovate UK, and she reports progress directly to UKRI's executive committee. And this group, this UKRI group, is the central governance group for the UKRI Global Food Security Programme, which I lead. Our major focus at the moment is a joint approach to the spending review. Another key recommendation was the development of a UKRI vision on food and an associated strategy, and we're about to start work on that. This will be the first time that UKRI as a whole has had a strategy on food. I'm looking forward to get going with that. We're keen to get our ducks in a row across UKRI through this new group, but we clearly recognise the need to engage with stakeholders at the right time, and we plan to set up ad hoc advisory groups as and when required, for example, at the beginning of the strategy development process. We're also looking at the role of institutes and centres involved in food across all councils. There are already good examples of cross-council, cross-institute programmes, for example, those funded by BBSRC and NERC. We're keen to understand how institutes and centres might work together to tackle broader food system issues. And then finally, just to say there were other recommendations, important ones as well, such as we're thinking about talent and how we train and retain the best people in research, but also international collaboration and how we do that in an increasingly uncertain world. So moving on to our investments, we funded a major interdisciplinary programme of research on transforming the UK food system. This aimed to address some of the key challenges that I outlined earlier in terms of healthy people and a healthy environment. The main question we wanted to address was this: if we put healthy people and a healthy environment right at the heart of the food system, what would we eat? How would we encourage people to eat it? And where would that food come from? So what would we grow and manufacture in the UK? And what would we need to import? And then what interventions across government, business and civil society would deliver this transformed food system in practice? The programme brings together researchers from different disciplines, government, business and civil society to co-produce and co-deliver the research. This includes research teams working with stakeholders to actually trial interventions within the lifetime of the grants. Quite often research is done, a report is produced and then it goes out for people to use. This is very much researchers overseeing those interventions during the grant's lifetime. And I think what is needed really is collective and simultaneous action across the food system. And we've set up the grants to facilitate that from the outset. We've also funded a Centre for Doctoral Training to develop the next generation of food system thinkers. We're pleased to publish the approach we took in this programme in the first edition of Nature Food. So this slide gives you a sense of the coverage of the projects we've supported across the food system. This analysis was done quite early on. As you can see, we had a gap in the portfolio on trade, and we subsequently funded a project on that topic, so it's no longer a huge gap. But you can see the portfolio provides wide-ranging coverage across the whole food system, with at least one project's primary focus in each area. And this is the programme's coverage across the UK. To note, this doesn't include the CDT, which would also give us coverage of Wales. Over 37 different universities and research organisations were funded across 4 large consortia, a Centre for Doctoral Training and 12 smaller projects. More than 200 organisations are involved in our programme, including government, supermarkets, SMEs, trade bodies and the third sector. Now, I'm not expecting anyone to be able to read the details on this slide, but I put this up really to highlight some of the things we're doing to try and drive the knowledge into policy and practice. What we have here are the 4 pillars of the developing national food strategy in the centre, mapped to the projects in our programme, which are in green. You can see good coverage of the areas being covered in the strategy, and we hope to channel that body of knowledge into the process. We plan to publish the programme's key findings in the Royal Society of Philosophical Transactions, and whilst not a blueprint necessarily in itself, it should offer the beginnings of a blueprint to transform the UK food system. Just in terms of other investments, through the Building a Secure Resilient World strategic theme, I led a sub-theme on resilient supply chains, and this resulted in 2 key investments. Firstly, the Reimagining Supply Chains Network Plus, led out of Queen's University Belfast, which will bring together experts from academia, industry and government to map out potential supply chain disruptions and find ways to respond effectively. Network Plus activities will include sandpits, knowledge exchange sessions, scoping exercises, challenge and solution sprints, and foresighting workshops to gather insights and intelligence. They'll also take forward supply chain modelling. And one of the reasons I wanted to mention this investment today is they'll also operate a flexible fund, which will be open to all, with opportunities for research activities, innovation programmes and travel grants. And then secondly, we funded 5 research projects to boost the resilience of the food system to cascading risks. For example, understanding how geopolitical stability might interact with climate change. A range of different commodities and supply chain challenges are being investigated in these grants. The link to the news article is in there if you want to know more. And then I think finally, our land use and net zero activities were funded under the Building a Green Future theme, as you're all aware, and that consisted of a hub and a set of research grants supported across UKRI with DEFRA and devolved administrations. The hub has a focus on generating evidence for land use change to achieve net zero, feeding into DEFRA's land use consultation, as we heard earlier. The research grants were announced at the end of last year and now in full flow. I won't go through the grants because I'm, again, sure you're all familiar with the details, but there's more information on the website if you want to know more. And then finally, I just want to pay tribute to the excellent work done by the Agri-Food Network, whether that's bringing together and actively engaging a large and vibrant community, as is being done over the last couple of days, supporting early career researchers or developing scenarios and research priorities. Your work is very much appreciated. I'll stop there. Thank you for listening.
Thanks very much, Riaz. Are you able to take questions for a few minutes? We've got about 10 minutes.
Of course, very happy to. Very happy.
Great. So I can act as the intermediary. There's a hand up over there. Have we got a roving mic is heading that way? You might be able to hear it directly through the mic.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes,
Can you hear me?
yeah. Do you want to say who you are?
I'm Seamus Stout with Falkland Centre for Stewardship. Question about future funding and programmes and what the knowledge of that is, or what does that look like for moving forward?
Did you hear the question?
I didn't get that whole question. Do you mind just summarising?
What's the future look like for funding? Is there anything you can say about how things are likely to unfold in this space in the future?
Yeah, so my whole role really is about trying to get as much funding as I can for food systems research covering the whole supply chain from farm to fork. At present, we're going through a spending review, and we have had a commission from DSIT, our parent department, and we've made the best case that we can for research and innovation and its clear role in driving growth. So we've done that for research as a whole, and at some point we'll get the Chancellor's announcement on that, and then the departments will get their budgets. And then it'll take a few months after that for that to work through into UKRI and council allocations. So I would say there's currently a lot of uncertainty about funding, and you're all aware of the current economic situation. But where opportunities emerge, as I mentioned with strategic themes, collective funds, which aren't always targeted towards challenges in food, they're sometimes targeted at broader opportunities. I will try and make the case for there to be a focus on food in some of those areas, particularly around the collective funds. I'm very keen to make sure we get interdisciplinary working across UKRI, across the councils, and that food system approach. And the two programmes that I led on food system resilience and health inequalities in the food system are testament to that. So I think I'll absolutely continue to make the case for food security research. Funding is generally uncertain at the moment, but as we know, it's not a challenge that's going to go away anytime soon.
Other questions? Yeah, there's one at the back. If anyone, I think.
Hello, very interesting presentation. Thank you for that. Ife Makano, a champion for the AFN Network. And I think in terms of forming networks, the funding has been very useful to form the networks and get people together. But I think it's important to leverage the work that networks are doing to make sure there is continuity. So I see a lot of networks being set up, and at the end of the funding, the network can't be sustained, and all the resources put into putting things together are lost. It would be good if we're considering and looking into future funding. How can we ensure that the work that have already been done by the different networks can be effectively harnessed and strengthened to deliver better outputs? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. This is a challenge that occurs all the time. We fund things in UKRI because of budget uncertainty. We can't fund things forever. So there is a challenge around legacy programs, and for the Transforming Paper Systems program, for example, a very large program of research which will come to an end in a couple of years. There's a question about legacy, how we build on that. The same goes for the Agri-Food Network, and how best to build on it. I think there are a variety of mechanisms that we're trying to put into place to provide at least a route into applying for future funding. Within BBSLC, for example, within our responsive mode now, which is I mentioned earlier, responsive mode mechanisms are open at all times. We are trialing a pilot on funding networks within that route, and trying to have a dedicated pot of funding specifically for networks, so they don't have to compete with research grants. So that's something that we're trying to do. I'd also flag interdisciplinary responsive mode as a kind of capsule for more of the interdisciplinary work that we want to support. So there are a variety of groups, but I accept the challenge, clearly we do want to build on what's already happened and find ways of continuing the good work that you.
Okay, thank you. Hand up just in the middle there.
Hi there. Yeah, thank you. Aaron Redman from Innovation for Agriculture and the Royal Agricultural Society of England. And I was just wondering if there's a UKRI incentive to support practitioners implementing their own research and to deliver practical solutions, particularly farmer-led research.
Yeah, no, good question. So we support a broad range of research, from very basic to highly applied across UKRI. And I guess the example I'd point to here is probably the Farm Innovation Platform between DEFRA and Innovate UK, which very much looks at farmer-led research. And I think absolutely right, there's a lot to be learned from that. A lot of the regenerative agriculture movement is ahead of the curve, I guess, perhaps slightly ahead of the research. And it's important we support that sort of research as part of our offering in UKRI. So there is support. A lot of it, I would suggest, is channels through Innovate UK, but we're also looking in BBSRC how we support that sort of research as well, including through our institute.
Great, thank you. There's a hand up over there.
Thank you. My name is Lydia Cabral from the Institute of Development Studies. My question is whether UKRI funding can support positioning UK's food systems in international context. So in your presentation, you highlighted, of course, food system issues in the UK context, and the Big Tent event is very much focused on that. You did touch on issues of trade, international trade as the connection to the outside world, but I wonder whether there is a case for supporting research that looks at other types of flows, international flows of ideas, of people, of technology, and of knowledge more broadly. So, yeah, your views on that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, so I focus my talk on the UK. As you said, Agri-Food Network is a UK network, and some of the work we've done recently in the programme. But of course, in UKRI, we're very keen on international engagement. There's a whole load of different funding schemes and grants that have been awarded looking at international collaboration, international development, including all of the things you highlight in your question. So there is a whole load of work going on to increase international collaboration, particularly on the ODA side, help people in developing countries and fostering collaboration with developed economies as well. So there's a whole raft of research happening on international engagement.
Great, thanks very much, Riaz. Any other questions before we draw things to a close? Yeah, just one here. Let's get a mic. It's so that Riaz can hear as well, I think.
Thanks very much. You mentioned, I think, 14.5 million that's about to be for collaborative projects for net zero agriculture. I mean, is that definitely going to happen, or is that subject to the spending review? And when will the process start that we can make those applications, please?
So that's actually grants that have already been awarded at the end of last year. They are definitely going to happen. They're not subject to spending review. In terms of new programs, I think as I mentioned, there's a time frame associated with spending review and that working its way through. So in the meantime, we have our responsive mode schemes, which are open at any time for proposals. So you can put in proposals at any time to UKRI, look on the website there. But in terms of targeted investments, they will follow, I would say, later in the year when we have more certainty over our budgets. And we've developed our strategy in UKRI in terms of where we target those.
Okay. I think we'll draw it to a close at that point. We're coming up to the coffee break. Riaz, thanks very much for taking the time out to join us online and for your presentation and answering the questions. That was really helpful. Always good to have a UKRI presence, and we're very appreciative of the funding that we've been able to have to put on today's event and all the other activities. So great, thanks very much. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.